All right, welcome everyone to our Avetta Analytics Designer course. My name is Tyler. I'm one of the trainers here with Avetta, and today's session is intended for client users who already have some basic understanding of the analytics program, but want to learn a little bit more on the design aspect of building analyses, dashboards, and reports. And that's what we're going to go into today. Now, with this session, the prerequisite, as I mentioned, is the viewer course. So if you haven't already, I would highly recommend that you attend the viewer course just to make sure that you're comfortable with navigation and the basic functionalities within analytics, just to make sure that you are relatively comfortable as we dive into a little bit more of the complex and detailed information within analytics. Now, within analytics, where we're going to start is within the library tab. Within the library tab, we can access our existing reports along with any reports that have been shared with us. So both of those items are available to us within one of two folders. My items are going to be all of the items that I personally own. Shared with me are going to be any items that have been shared with me by either Avetta or by one of my internal coworkers. Now, when it comes to designing or creating the analyses that we're going to talk about, there are really three components within analytics that we can build. The first thing that we're going to talk about is analysis. Analysis these are the building blocks of anything else that we're going to build. So the analyses pull that raw data that we're looking for, whether it's, I want to know my supplier's flag statuses, I want to know where they're located, whatever that may be, that's kind of what it looks like. It's usually one specific topic that we're pulling within an analysis that we can use as a building block as we build out dashboards and reports. A dashboard is a singular location that you can go to access all of that information in one location, rather than having to navigate between several different analyses that are going to contain different data. We can import those analyses blocks into the dashboard, which gives me one easy to access location for all the information that I'm looking for. Lastly is report. Report is pretty similar to dashboard in that it is built of analyses components. However, the use case for report is a little bit different. Usually when we're using a report, it's simply to share with non-analytics users. So if there's someone within your company who would like to receive reports, but they don't have an Avetta Connect account or user, or they don't want to log in on a daily basis, then you can build a report and you can schedule those reports to be automatically sent to whoever you've designated via email on a regular cadence of daily, weekly, or monthly, or even one-time occurrences. So we're going to dive into each of these. Before we do any of that, we're going to talk about analysis, though. Now, with analysis, there are really two ways that we can build this. We can build an analysis from an existing analysis, so something that's already in place. And I 100% of the time always recommend that you try to build something from an existing analysis. It will save you a lot of heartache. It's just much quicker and easier. The second way is going to be to build it from scratch. Now, building from scratch, of course, is going to be a little bit more complicated because you don't have that skeleton to build off of. We are going to go over building from scratch mostly today because that is the more complicated one. But I'm going to show you really quickly, in case you are able to build off an existing report, how to do that and how to edit them. Now, Avetta has put together a resources folder for you called the standard library, and it's found under the shared with me folder on the left-hand banner of your library. So if you drop down shared with me, you should see standard library. You can drop that one down once more, and it's segmented into several different categories. Now, within the standard library, these are analyses that we have pre-generated and pre-built for you as our clients to really make your life a lot easier. We've built out the most common use case analyses that we see. Things such as, I want to see the red flagged suppliers who are at 100%. They've completed all their tasks and they're red flagged. Or I want to see where my suppliers are located, the insurance details of my suppliers. So we've really built out the information that you're looking for most of the time so that you don't have to build everything from scratch. Now, that being said, this is usually where you're going to go if you want to build something off of an existing analysis, because there's so much here. So if we click on flags as an example within our standard library, it will show us the contents to the right. So if I was looking for all of my, all of the suppliers that I have force flags on, but specifically force flags for electricians, I already have a force flag analysis. The only thing I would have to do to this is add that extra filter that says force flags who are in the trade of electrician. So that makes my life so easy, simple as adding one single filter. Anything within the shared with me folder, anything in these contents, you are unable to edit because you have view only access because it's owned by someone else. If you need to make edits or you want to build off of one of these, you simply need to click on the icon to the right hand side. This is the duplicate icon. So if I click on duplicate on that all force flags that I just pointed out, it's going to load real quick here. And we're not going to see that change happen here because again, we're still in that shared with me folder. I don't have access to edit these. What duplicating it does is it instead creates a copy within my items folder, which I will then be able to edit. So right here we can see copy of all force flags. All I would need to do to start editing it is simply clicking on it and it'll take me to the analysis details where I can make whatever edits I need. To the right, you'll also notice I don't have the duplicate icon anymore because I have all of the functionalities of a designer. So that's a use case one that you're able to do, editing from an existing item. Again, always my recommendation because it does make it a lot easier. Now we're going to move into scenario two. We're trying to build something from scratch. And that's usually when it gets a little bit more complicated. And I do see a question. Can you clarify the ownership? Absolutely. My items is anything that is owned by me. So I have either created these items or I have duplicated these items from one of these in the shared with me folder. So it's one of those two cases. That means that I personally own it. If it shows up under my items, I have full edit access. It's not just view only access like we do with the shared with me folders. Now the shared with me folders, the ownership's a little bit more hazy because it really could be owned by anyone. So long as they've shared it with us, that's where it's going to show up. So the standard library is shared with you by an Avetta user. I look at these and these are shared by my internal coworkers. So it really just depends, but that's kind of what I mean when I'm talking about ownership. That's a really good question. We then own the shared with me once I edit it. Not quite. You technically own this one, right? Because we made a copy, it's now under my items. So it is an item that I own, so I have free edit access. But it's not going to let me edit the original source file within the shared with me folder because that's still owned by someone else. I just own that now newly duplicated version of that. Does that make sense? Okay, awesome. All right, now, oh, sorry, I see one more question coming through. Yeah, good question. So explain the difference between the source information and the owned information. So again, when we first log into the library, we really only see the two folders, right? My items and shared with me. My items aren't going to be those source items because they are the ones that I have access to go and edit. They aren't the original copies. When I say the source file, that is the original file, the one that was originally created and shared with me under that shared with me folder. So when I create one, which we're going to talk about here in a second, creating one from scratch, anytime I create something, it will always show up under my items because it's something that I own. I have created that item. It is my item. It's not something that has been shared. If you, as a user within your own company, were to share one of the items that you've created with another user, say that you shared it with me, I would see that item show up under shared with me because I have view access. You've shared it with me so that I have view access. But if I need edit access or I need to make any changes to that, I first have to make a copy of that, what we call source file. Source file just meaning that's the original file that was shared. So when we make that copy, that's when it shows up under my items here, copy of all force flags. That is now my item that I can edit. And that's really the difference between the two. The source file is the original one that's been shared with me, whereas the file that I own is the one that I've duplicated and now shows up under my items. Does that make a little bit more sense? Yeah, no problem at all. All right, now building an analysis from scratch. We talked about building it from an existing one. The first and most important thing for you to understand when you're building an analysis from scratch is in the Shared With Me folder, under Standard Library, there's a folder called Resources. Resources does not contain any information regarding your supply chain. This is resources for analytics. So this is where you can go to access any of the information that we've uploaded here for your own reference when building out an analysis. Now, there are only two items that show up here. The first one is the table of contents. The table of contents simply gives us a breakdown of what each data table contains. So each of the values or columns that I'm going to be able to pull from each data table, which we're going to look at the data tables here in a moment. The data model is a flow chart that shows me how each of the data tables are connected. So when we click on data model, I know that it looks like a nightmare your first time seeing it, but this is kind of how the data tables work together. So each of these boxes is going to be its own data table. So we have the user data table, the client data table, the connection data table, and each data table has its own respective set of information. So if we're looking at the connection data table, this is going to tell me information about when did the supplier connect with me, what is their current connection status, what is their current compliance status. Information such as that is going to be shown on the connection data table. If I go to the question data table, this is going to give me a Q&A. This is what the question was in their PQF for their task that they filled out. This is what their answer was to that respective question. So you kind of get the idea. Each data table is going to give you a different set of columns. That's why that table of contents we saw as the other available item from the resources folder is really helpful at first, is so that you can familiarize yourself with what information you're pulling and where I'm going to find that information. Now, the reason that this table looks the way it does with all of the arrows going every which direction is to show you how these tables connect with each other. Now, what I mean by that is if I want to see any suppliers who had fatalities in California, the fatalities information, if I were to reference the table of contents, we can see fatalities are reported under the Safety North America data table, but location, the supplier's location, is located in the supplier data table. So in order for me to connect these two data tables to receive both of those data points that I'm looking for in the same analysis, I need to find out how these connect to each other. I call it the common denominator just because it makes sense in my mind. But if we flow this back and go here, audit detail is our common denominator or our common data table in this case, because we can see audit detail goes to Safety North America, which is where my fatalities were. And audit detail also goes to connection, which then leads me to supplier. So this one table connects both of these. If I were to select connection, couldn't do that because I can't go backwards. It only is going to connect me to supplier. I couldn't start with Safety North America for the same reason. It doesn't go backwards. I can't go from Safety North America to audit detail. It must follow the flow of the arrows. Now, I know this can be a little bit, just a lot at first when understanding. So are there any questions on the way that this data table works, or even what this is or why we're looking at it before we dive in a little bit deeper into now building that analysis? Okay. Okay, awesome. Well, we'll dive in then. Now we're going to go ahead and use that example that I just gave of the fatalities for the demonstration that we do today. So we're looking for suppliers who are located in California who have had fatalities of some sort. Our fatalities are here. Our location is here. So we're going to start with audit detail, and we're going to select connection, supplier, and Safety North America. That's going to make sense here in just a moment. To create a new analysis, we are going to click on Analysis up on the top. And when we do so, it's going to ask us to give it a name. So we'll say California Suppliers with Fatalities. Okay. I've built this before, by the way. That's why I pre-generated the name. All right. And the first thing that it does is say, select your data. My data is each of those respective data columns that we just saw on the data model flowchart. So if you remember, right, the ones that we wanted to start with, audit detail. The nice thing with these data tables is if you forget what information is housed, notice when I hover over audit detail, it gives me all of this description. Each of those are broken up by commas, are going to be respective columns or data points that are pullable from that data field. So it is helpful to be able to hover and see which items I can select from that data table. Now we said starting with audit detail, we then needed connection, which allows me to flow into supplier. And from supplier, we also said we needed the Safety North America table. Okay, so I was just following the flow chart in my mind as I was going through these. Notice when I select my first one, I really have all of the options. Once I've selected audit detail, I now have a limited selection because these are the items that audit detail flows into. So I can't select anything that audit detail didn't flow into. That was the idea behind that workflow that we just saw. Okay. Now it will automatically select some options for you just as pre-designated data points. You can clear those just by clicking the all box twice. It'll clear out the selection so that you can start from scratch. That's my personal preference, totally up to you. Now that we're looking at the information, if you remember, the only two data tables we really needed were supplier, because this is where I can get the supplier's state. So we'll go ahead and select supplier state and maybe even city. And on Safety North America, this is where we can see the fatalities information. So here's OSHA fatalities, MSHA fatalities, and they even have Canada fatalities on here. So these two data tables were simply there for me to get from point A to point C. I had to go through point B, and these were my point B. Even though we don't specifically need information from those two data tables, make sure that you always select at least one column per data table. The reason is it will throw you an error if you have any blank data tables. You need to make sure that you have one selected. It may not throw you the error right away, but it will happen, and it's not pretty. You have to kind of start from scratch. So on audit detail, one that I like to select is supplier ID. That's something that's always going to be referenceable. And then on connection, we'll do supplier name. So not fields that I needed necessarily, however, they're still helpful to have. Once we've selected all of the data points that we would like shown on our table, we're going to go ahead and click OK down at the bottom. And once this loads, we'll go ahead and click data to shrink it. I now have my table, and my table, notice, shows all of those data points that I've selected as their own respective columns. And that is building an analysis from scratch. So those are the extra steps that you have to go through in order to get to this point. If you were to click on an existing analysis, this is what it's going to look like. So we're pretty much at the same spot now. The difference between the two, of course, is needing to reference the flow chart to then select the proper data tables and data points. Do you have any questions on that process up to this point before we talk about adding more of the granular details to this analysis. Okay, awesome. Well, we'll move on then. Within our analysis, now that we have it built, we have several different sub-tabs across the top. The data tab is that one that we just use to select our data tables and data points. If I forgot one, I need to add an extra one. Really easy. Click on data, simply check the box that you need, and then go down and click OK. And that's going to go ahead and generate the new column. Formula. Formula is for really like analytics power users for the most part. The analytics runs on SQL, so you can use the SQL language when using the formulas. It is coding, essentially. So if you're familiar with coding, then this is right up your alley. If you're not familiar with coding, don't worry. I'm not either, and I'm able to pull really anything that I've ever needed to through analytics without those. So formulas can make your life a little bit easier. If you do want to play with formulas, whether you're literate at coding or not, there is a formula help option, which takes you to the lovely Analytics Help Center. And on the left, you've got the function name. It tells you what that function is supposed to do, what the syntax is, and any additional notes that our developers decided were relevant to that type of function. I, again, don't have any coding experience. However, I have been able to successfully use some of these functions just based on the Syntax Help Center. So I do highly recommend if you're wanting to try and use a formula, use the formula help. It really is built out pretty well to explain what you need to do. Formulas can be pretty simple as well. So if you want to just do a mathematical equation, you can do that. What the formula does is if we add a name and we say fatalities, oh man, there we go, total fatalities, and then I enter my formula, it's going to create a new column called total fatalities that runs whatever formula I've entered in here. I'm not going to demo it. It's a little more advanced than we need to go into, but I did want to let you know that that was a function in case you need it. Filters. Filters are going to be kind of a staple in pulling your analytics reports. And the reason behind that, of course, is we've pulled my data. So here I can see all of my suppliers, their locations, their fatalities, but this isn't the exact information I was looking for, right? I was looking for suppliers in California who had more than 0 fatalities. So it's important for us to use filters to narrow down to what I'm looking for. So the first thing that we do is select the filter column. We'll go ahead and say their supplier state. The comparison is simply going to be a mathematical equation for the most part. So it's equal, it's less than, it's greater than, or it contains, doesn't contain, whatever it is that's looking for. In this case, we're going to go ahead and say equals California and click add. And now that we've added that, we can see the filter here that's been applied. I can remove it by clicking remove, or I can override it. So select a new filter and click replace, which will override this existing filter and replace it. But down at the bottom on our table, we can now see supplier state is California across the board. Now, the next one that we want to do is OSHA fatalities. We'll say OSHA fatalities are more than 0 because we wanted to see suppliers with fatalities. Go ahead and click add. Now, when we look at our table, we're seeing OSHA fatalities at least 1 or more, and they're located in California. When you have at least two filters, you have 2 additional options that generate. You have the and or logic that's available to the left. So if you needed to change this to an or, they're located in California, or they have more than 0 OSHA fatalities, then you can just click on the and that will toggle it over to an or statement instead. And lastly, to the right, you have these 3 fields here. The first one is simply to move the filter up or down in order. So if you wanted fatalities on the top, we could click up and it would go to the top. These are to add parentheses. So if I needed to add parentheses, always start at the bottom of your parentheses. So wherever those end is where you will add. So if I needed parentheses around these 2, I could click plus and it would add them around the 2. And that's really it. Filters are pretty easy. There's not a whole lot to to filtering. If you want to add a quick filter, you can instead click on the column name and click filter, and it will automatically generate this for you. Oh, I should do a different one so it looks different. There we go. So you can see it automatically set MSHA fatalities, and then we just have to fill out the bottom too. So up to you how you do it. You can do it via the tab or via the column name. Any questions on the filters, applying those, or the logic? Okay, awesome. Charts and crosstabs. Once we have our data set built, so now I have the data set that I was looking for, right? Suppliers located in California who have a fatality. Now that I have my data set built, I can then add additional components such as charts or crosstabs to then further detail out the information or to give us a different type of visual. Clicking on Add Charts gives us the ability to select from several different chart types, whatever's most relevant to what it is that we're looking for. So we can do bar charts, line charts, anything on here is available to you. So very helpful. Once you selected the chart, it may change the data that's being shown below. So if we select a pie graph, it's going to be different information than the bar graph is. It really just depends on what you're pulling. So we could select OSHA fatalities here. You can select relevance. You can turn off relevance if you want. Relevance simply pulls out the outliers, so you don't have any outliers showing once your report's built. So we'll go ahead and turn mine off. All right, and once we click OK, it will then generate my pie graph. I'll see whatever details I've entered in there. Not the best example, but we have the different suppliers along with the total number of OSHA fatalities that they have. I'm going to go ahead and minimize this. Outside of the chart, the last one we have is a crosstab. Now, a crosstab is still going to be in a tabular format, similar to what we saw with the original table that was generated. But the crosstab, I'll show you, it's kind of different. Okay. What this does is it takes a cell value and makes a column header and a row header so that you can compare that information. So here we can see ACCO Engineering Services. They're located in Glendale. They had 63 fatalities. So it just gives me the information so that I have the row headers along with the column headers, which were originally just cell values within my original table. So it helps to be able to compare suppliers against suppliers, locations against locations. Just depending on what you're looking for, the crosstab can give you kind of a different twist on the information that you're already looking at in the table, because it does give you that different view or that different perspective that you wouldn't originally have from that table that we saw at the beginning. Okay. Now that we've talked about each of the tabs across the top, there's one more item that we need to understand within an analysis in order for us to build a report or a dashboard, and that is the exporting. The item right here with the 3 boxes in the check is called adding to a visual gallery. The visual gallery you can think of as the cloud, right? We use a cloud in several different other softwares. If you think about, Google has a cloud, Microsoft has the SharePoint and OneDrive clouds. This is kind of the analytics cloud that is in-house. It's only going to be used within analytics, and we call it the visual gallery. What this is going to do, if I export this table, we can say fatalities in California table. Once I give it a name, it then saves this table to that visual gallery, and it does just save the table. So if I want my charts and crosstabs, I have to do it for each respective one. But it saves it to that visual gallery so that when I'm building my dashboard and report, I can select from those visual gallery components and say, I want to add this item to my dashboard. So if you don't export it to the visual gallery, you will not be able to use it as a component in your dashboard or report. You have to make sure to save it to the visual gallery first. And that's really it for building the analysis. That's kind of the basics. There's a lot more that you can do with it, but we're not going to dive into that. We don't have the time to do so. So are there any questions to this point that you guys have on building an analysis? Okay, great. That's the hard part. The analysis is, I would say, probably the most challenging part to build. Now that we get into dashboards and reports, it gets a little bit simpler. So with a dashboard, just like we did with analysis, if we want to build a new dashboard, we're going to click on dashboard across the top. It'll give me the name of the dashboard. So we'll say California suppliers with fatalities again. Copy that and click OK. Takes me to my dashboard, and the first thing that I'm going to see is the visual gallery, which is that exact item that I just mentioned we have to have in order to pull the information we're looking for. So we can go ahead and add these panels here. Sure, we'll add those 4. All right, once we've added them, we can click the X on the top right, and then this is going to load, and it'll show each of those individual components within my dashboard. Must have picked some big components. Apologies for the loading time. Haven't. There we go. I must have picked a big one, so I apologize for that load time. Now, once we get our dashboard loaded, the first time with those different graphics, it will load much quicker afterwards. It's just the initial upload that sometimes takes a minute. The default layout for a dashboard is 3 columns. So we can see there's a column break right here, and there's a column break right here. So you can pretty clearly see those 3 columns once I've hovered. The 3 columns are really up to my discretion on how to use those. I can drag and drop these items into either of these columns that I'd like. I can also change that layout by going to my tab settings right here. So where I'm in this tab, I can click on the gear to go to the settings. And from here, I can add additional items from my visual gallery. So if I built a new analysis and I need to add additional components, I can do that from here. But change layout is the one that I was going to refer to. Here we can see 3 was selected. We could change it to 2 or 1. I'm going to not do that so that we don't have to wait for it to load once more. But know that you do have the ability to change how many columns show up, anywhere from 1 to 8 columns. The last setting that we have in here, aside from renaming, we can rename the tab, is the global filters. Global filters is a really cool function within the dashboard, because what this can do is, the reason it's called global is because it affects everything. So I can have a dashboard built of several different analyses components, but if they all share the same exact column of flag color, as an example, then I can add that global filter to say I want to see flag color as red. Now, a great example of this is actually your default dashboard, and it's called the supplier overview dashboard. This is one that you should already have access to. We create a copy for every user. So this is usually the standard landing page. It may look familiar if you haven't changed it. Now, when I said adding those global filters, so when I click add global filter here, click on the gear to edit the settings. I think it may be loading. Show you a different way if it doesn't work. It's the exact same idea of adding the filters as we saw in the analysis. So I select the column, I select the comparison, and then I enter the value that I want the filter to be applied to. There we go. Just took a second. So I can add that filter exactly the same way that I added them within the analysis. So applying these filters, again, it's going to apply it to any component that shares that same column that I've selected. So you do want to make sure that you're selecting columns that they all have in common. Go ahead and click X on that. Another way to add a filter when you're within the dashboard is you can also just click on your graphics. So if I wanted to see all red suppliers, I can click on this red right here on my line graph or bar graph. And once I've clicked on it, it'll take just a second to load and we'll be able to see those changes. So even as a viewer, viewers are also have this ability to apply these as temporary filters so that they can drill into the data of my connection flag color is red. And that gives me the ability to kind of drill into my supply chain a little bit deeper. If I need to undo those, I can click on the undo button, or within the global filters, it's showing right here. So I could just click remove and it'll go right back to the way that we had it before. And with dashboards, that's really it. There's not a whole lot that goes into dashboards. They're pretty simple for the most part. Let's remove. Again, analyses are a little bit more complicated, but do you guys have any questions on building the dashboard, what the components or settings are, anything like that? Okay, great. Well then, our last stop is going to be our report. Clicking on report is going to allow us to create a new report. Go ahead and name it the same thing. And within the report, again, it's pretty similar to the dashboard. The biggest difference between dashboards and reports are the use case. Dashboards are a little bit more functional in that, you saw I could click on the different graphics to add filters. I can kind of play with the data in whatever way I need. With reports, these are really intended for sharing. So we're not going to manipulate data within the report or add filters or anything of that nature. Here we're just, hey, look, here's the graphic or here's the data that we are wanting to share. And then we can share that with external users. Now within the report, on the left-hand side, these are all of the different components of your report. So if I want to add a title, I can just drag the text. Wherever that yellow bar shows up is where this item that I'm dragging and dropping is going to appear. So I can enter my text. Let's call it my California suppliers with fatalities. I can insert information that will auto update each time the report is pulled. So the date is a great one. So I want that on the next line. I can center it, I can bold it, I can italicize it, whatever I would like to. Note that this is just a text box. So if you apply these settings, you're not going to see them happen in the text box. You will see them happen in live time in real time on the actual report once you click set. Font size, it's a title, so we probably want it big. For the color, maybe we'll pick an Avetta green color. And then down below, we can apply borders as well if we'd like. And once we click set, now we can see it's bolded, it's green, it has my date here. So it's been generated exactly how I asked it to. If I want to split the rows, so if I have several graphics, we can click split. And that'll create two columns instead of the singular column. This is really good for smaller visuals. So if I wanted to add a pie graph here as an example, and maybe I can add a bar graph to the other one. It just fits really well with those little tiny charts. We can add spaces. So if I don't like how clumped up this is together, I can add a space in here and select how many spaces. Number of lines is just, if you were to hit the return key, how many times would you have hit the return key for the amount of space that you're looking for? And then once you click save, it'll apply that space here so that it's not so grouped together. Other items that are available to you, you can add images. So if there's an image that you'd like uploaded, your company logo, or an image that's external, it's a graphic that isn't housed within analytics, you can do so by dragging and dropping this. You have links and PDF links as well. Links, if we add one, we can add one right here. This one, we could say the Avetta website And then when we enter the URL, we go avetta.com, click OK. And this is going to be a hyperlink. So once I click on that, it takes me directly to avetta.com so that I can access whatever link that is. Whoever's receiving on the receiving end of this report will also be able to access those hyperlinks. The PDF link allows a download as PDF option so that whoever you're sending it to, instead of having to view it in their email each time, they can instead come in, they can click on download as a PDF, and it will download them that PDF copy of whatever report it is that you've broken out, so that they don't, again, have to reference their email each time. And that's really it with reports. If you want to preview your report, you can click on View. And this will give me a preview of how it's going to look when it's received by the user that we're sharing it with. And so that's how I'm going to be able to see exactly what they're going to see before I get it sent over. That being said, that's really it for reports. Reports are pretty simple. There's not a lot to them. It's just a matter of adding it and formatting it the way that you want. You can make them as pretty or as simple as you would like. But do you guys have any questions on the report item, on building reports within analytics? And I'll show you how to share one here in just a second. Okay, awesome. Well, we are going to go ahead and talk about scheduling these reports so that you know how to get those sent out to those external people that we were talking about. If you click on library, it's going to take just a second to load here. All right, when you click on library, and I'm going to go to my items because that's where that report that I just created is housed. Here I can see reports. Reports are always indicated by the white page, and reports are the only ones that'll have this clock icon. The clock icon is how I schedule that report to be sent out. So clicking here on the clock allows me to schedule. Here I can determine who it's from, who it's to, what the subject and message is, along with the orientation of the message. And then, so this is really just the email settings. Below, we then have the actual interval or scheduling. So we can determine whether it is going to be a one-time occurrence or if it's recurring on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, what time that should start running on, along with what date that, that interval is going to begin. So I can determine all those details here. Again, they don't have to be analytics users to be able to share these. That's kind of the idea behind reports, is to be able to share with people who aren't actively in analytics. Common question that we receive is, is my report going to have to be refreshed manually each time? Do I need to log in to make sure that it's up to date? You do not. Analytics always runs on live data. So before any reports are scheduled to run, they will automatically refresh. That's why you don't see any save buttons or refresh buttons, is because it's all done automatically so that you don't have to worry about any of that. All right, and that's really it for analytics. We've covered all of the basic design components that we need to get you started. Do you guys have any questions before I show you just where to access answers and help articles? Okay, great. Well, accessing help articles on your screen, because you would be logged in as a client. From my side, I'm in an Avetta, so I don't have the support option. But on the left-hand side, the very last icon should be a circle with a question mark that says support. The support icon takes you to the help center. You can also go directly to help.avetta.com. You're going to click on client user. And from here, you can search for different knowledge articles or help center articles from here. to look for whatever it is you want to find. We even have recordings of these sessions available within the Help Center. So if you need to revisit one of our courses, you can listen to the recording. And down below, we have different topics that you can browse through as well, analytics being one of those. From here, there's also a training tab where you can sign up for additional trainings. We do trainings on Connect, worker management, analytics, of course, which is what we're doing today. So if there are additional items that you'd like to attend a training for, you can absolutely sign up for those with us. We're more than happy to take you through anything else as well. But that's it. I just wanted to leave you with that in case anything today gets forgotten as time goes on. But I hope that this was helpful. I really hope that you guys got something out of this and you feel a little bit more confident with your analytics skills. And I hope that you guys are staying safe with everything that's going on around us. Yeah, no problem at all. Thank you, guys.